Thank you very much, Christoph, and thank you very much for all of you attending here. It's really great to see such a great interest in this workshop. I think Henrik already did a fantastic job selling also and promoting and advertising design science, so we can win Nobel Prizes. So I mean that's hard to beat, right? Maybe let me add to this, and it's probably consistent also to winning Nobel Prizes. What my personal real fascination towards design science is this notion of innovative solutions to real world problems, right? So if I now was to say, why are you doing design science research altogether? What is it all about? It's about going beyond insight to impact, right? So identifying real world problems and trying to contribute to innovative solutions to those real world problems, and that's probably also what gets you winning Nobel Prizes. So that's why it's why it's probably really not so inconsistent. But also let me say that before you win Nobel Prizes, you can make so many people happy with design science, and yourself included. So that's probably part of it, which is I find fascinating, to really, because it's rewarding to work on real world problems, and it's also rewarding to see that your own research can contribute to, you won't solve them all together, but to contribute to solutions to real world problems. So when I now been invited here, I'd like to first of all probably share a little bit of this very also pragmatic view on design science. It's really can do, very straightforward way. And also I then also brought a few conceptualizations we have been able to come up with in the discourse during the past 20 to 30 years, in which design science research has been more discussed and matured in the information systems field. And I just hope to get that, set that out there, so to see we can discuss to what extent that probably be insightful for you also, and to what extent it might make sense to stimulate and guide the discussion we have here as well. So when I'm trying to talk about design science, also to our executive students or to people around the world, I like to start with a very simple example, which I've presented here with this, which is Tesco's approach to enter the South Korean market in retail. And of course they did research, they inquired, they observed markets, and it was a tough approach for them, because apparently they used to be a big market leader already, and so they were wondering how would they have a chance actually to enter this market. And you see it here, like what you see is they actually really created a new shopping experience at that time, and I think it is 6 to 7 years old that they made this approach. And so instead of putting up posters saying come to our shop, home shop, plus they are called there, noodles are on sale. No, they didn't, but they actually innovated the whole interaction, the whole experience, by providing people with the opportunity to shop right there. And why was that? That certainly, of course, is a design. It's not. It is technologically ingrained, but as you see, it relates to people. It relates to behavior. It actually also relates to spatial organization. And arrangement. So it's not at all only technical, but it's really much more socio-technical thing, which is something very interesting in most of the design research we are doing. And it also wasn't just something they put out there, but it was subject to real investigations. And they figured kind of people would first of all, they would not enjoy shopping a lot, like we might, going to a marketplace and see some things and just enjoy it. No, they wouldn't. Also, they kind of local people there, they would have a lot of jobs. They would tend to be overworked in a way, so they would always very busy. And third, one would know they're affine to technology. And fourth, one figured they would also always be on public transport. So the idea here was really, and I think nicely as Henrik said it, so that kind of all those dots come together. So they created this nice fit in this design to say if that's the case, so that we can put something out there into the real world, which would actually allow people, while they're on the tube, to just do their shopping as they go. So, and in that way, they transferred waiting time into shopping time, which was super beneficial for the company. It was a great entrepreneurial move, but also it made life easier for people. It probably actually was good for the environment, because it reduced kind of very in line with the public transport mobility patterns. So it was very, very, very smart and very nice, very, very, very straightforward. And of course, you could imagine that what I'm showing here is just the front end. There's a whole back end, so the supply chain to make that work. So there's a lot of design decisions and elements in it. When I sell this now, as I said to students, I like to compare this a little bit black and white, right? So at that point, I'd always say like, okay, how do you want to conduct your research? You know, is it reading and footnotes and weighing and measuring, or is it such exciting new environments here? And of course, and you will hear me saying in a minute, it's of course not neither nor, absolutely not. It is about certainly doing both. But what I love is actually to go beyond theory into such usefulness and utility, right? So it's not only the insight, but it's also the impact. It's not the truth we are up for, and we try to put that down in theory, but it's the utility we are up for, and we try to create artifacts, things to be used, so that they might be useful in the end, which gets us excited in design science research. So when I say this, it's actually about this duality. I just from my sort of a little bit of, as Christoph also introduced it, kind of the emergence of design science, or how did that come in, the information systems discipline, and maybe that's in other fields we can observe this too, is that sometimes people would say, yeah, well, is this science now? And I think Henrik also put it out there saying, is it science? Yes, of course, he said, and I would agree, but of course there is always this sort of black and white, and is it one or the other? It's the old way, the new way. It's kind of, you know, in our field, we put loads into this big box saying this behavioral research, trying to study behavior, and then, you know, finding truth represented by theory. And on the other hand, there's design science. And if you look at it, and I don't want to do, you know, go back to that ages, but there had been quite some fighting actually between different camps and regions with their different traditions and whatnot. But I'd say the good thing is, and I would wish kind of new fields to get into it, to start there right away, is to understand it actually both, you know, and probably even more. And I've briefly illustrated this here in this illustration, saying that, you know, of course, in design science, you like to create something useful, like an airplane, for instance, right? And we wouldn't be able to fly around the world with only a theory about flying, right? So we need to, at some point, you know, we need to be courageous and say, okay, now we built this machine and we sit in it and let's see where we go, you know. But also you see from there, we would try to make sure that whatever the world knows all right about what keeps objects in the air and what makes objects fall down, we'd like to consider that in our prototype, right? So that's kind of, we try to build on theory as much as we can, call that kernel theory, informing the design. But then there is always this little bit like where we jump, you know, where we just put in something additional, which we cannot only technically derive from theory, but it's kind of really kind of subject to creative problem solving, and that we build into the solution. And this is also why then, once we have the solution, the kind of putting it back into real life and trying it out. So the evaluation, we say, of kind of our design is so important to cover for this creative and very subjective bit we've put into it, you know. But then, of course, and you see it now then you build something like an airplane and it's out there flying, so that changes the world, changes the way we interact. The internet and social media and whatnot has changed the way we behave and we perceive and we interact as humans around the world. Like, and that again constitutes, of course, new behavioral research. Sure, yeah. So all the work like now, how do we interact now with social media, and how does now the whole digitalization and virtual conferencing and whatnot has changed kind of our lives, you know. So and that again gives insight to new needs, and so we build new stuff and we try it out and study how we deal with it, you know. So it really goes in cycles, and that also shows it's a largely collaborative endeavor. It's about the accumulation of knowledge and evolution of knowledge, but in that regard, design science often is also in our world characterized as a research program rather than a single piece, because you know, we have an overarching design-oriented interest in what we do, and along the way, depending on the characteristics of the research field we are in, either it's full of research of theory already, or there's hardly no understanding. So it can be really very well that in course of kind of a design science research interest, we start developing a few and testing a few theories, and you know, and then eventually kind of we create something of use which we try out to be useful. Okay, so I hope we all understand kind of that is very much the overall understanding. So the behavioral research provides a foundation and evaluation for design science research, while at the same time, design science research can also make behavioral research more practically relevant and gets it out there and beyond theory. So then there's lots of interesting discussions, and I would hope that also to go into the new journal. So what makes good design, right? Actually, I do have this championship of bad design I can share with you. We have kind of the 10 worst designs. This is just one taken out of it. But again, as you see, depending on the context, right? If the railway system wouldn't operate anymore, it might be a marvelous design. But we don't know from this picture. But I'd like to invite you into to understand and get to look into research there, kind of what makes good design. There's kind of work towards design methodology. There's conceptual work on trying to better understand what is design knowledge, as I've selected this one here, which we have published in the Journal of Information of the Association for Information Systems together with colleagues. And I found this interesting also, probably, how to say, providing some context for the discussion around opportunities. And I will be very careful to touch upon the term opportunities, if even Hendrik would consider that a difficult term. Yeah, but here what we understood is when we discussed more and conceptualized what is actually design knowledge, then we realized it's actually a relation between knowledge about problems and solutions. It's not only the solution. And maybe philosophically we can discuss, is there a solution without an understanding of a problem at all, right? But certainly we would have always, we call it something now, that's kind of how we understand it in information systems. We would also think about these three elements, like this, or this relation between these two elements, problem and solution. So we explore also in all those methods, we explore the problem space, and then we kind of explore the solution space. And we try to identify potential solutions to potential problems we have understood, and we go there in a very iterative manner in order to explore the usefulness. And I think this research here is very in line with what Hendrik has described, because the context would matter a lot, the domain, the stakeholder space, time, and on the other hand, kind of the solution can be represented in different ways. It can be constructs, models, methods, design theory, it can be design principles, can be patterns, so can be different forms to represent. But then interestingly, we kind of the process always of this research is very much circled around kind of design activities and evaluation activities, right? So you try to, you know, to get an understanding out there and to evaluate it. And I think the characteristic also, if you distinct this now from other types of or paradigms of research, is really that, as I said earlier, in this design, there is this, what I find characteristic and also very fascinating, there's this jumping beyond what theory or what's out there already as knowledge and understanding about design knowledge. So you have this creative bit, you have this, if I may say, also entrepreneurial element, and you're allowed and invited actually to think and to propose something, and you get it out there, and hopefully you do a really tiny bit, because then you need to defend it in a way, you need to evaluate and make sure and demonstrate that it really, you know, is perceived useful, and that of course isn't a one-off, but it's very, very iterative in nature. So another interesting bit when we discuss about it, and I'd say our discussion will show this, is also that actually design science happens as a journey through space and time and space, right? So we would understand that what 50 years ago would have been a good solution for a problem might not be anymore because we have new technology. So there's this ephemeral nature of design knowledge also. And we also, we actually, we would need to look into that and to have a mechanism kind of on checking and updating kind of design knowledge, which I think no discipline at time now would have though. And, but then also kind of, we have different level of, people might say generality. We prefer the notion of projectability. So is this now kind of a solution to a problem, single instance, or is it more projectable? And you know, that kind of, in the sense that my design knowledge would be applicable to a lot of instances of problems, really. And on the other hand, we often see that there's a bit of a trade-off. The more projectable something is, the less fit it probably is in terms of what's the utility it develops and actually guiding specific solutions. So you might be familiar with the technology acceptance model saying make it useful and easy to use, full stop, that's it. It's very projectable, all right, but it's probably not super helpful when you are about to leverage blockchain technology also for digital startups. Good. There are a few principles and some criterion probably we can discuss later, but probably building from what I've just said. It's important really to make sure that you position your contribution in terms of what is really the intended usefulness. So who is supposed to benefit from this? How is this now advancing, providing significantly additional usefulness, what you're hoping to do there? Related to this, what's really the real world problem, right? So we should really make, we should link kind of our research actually really to real world problems, and not only to academic problems we try to sell as real world problems. It's some self-critique like happens in our discipline from time to time. And then also inform the design of the solution. So is it just a solution you get out there, or to what extent are you using established methods again and languages and forms of representation when you present the solution? So you want as much rigor in there as possible. And big time really the evaluation. So early design science research was very, in our field, was very weak on the evaluation. It was mainly like of designing something and getting it out there, and then if people would buy it or if they would cite it, then it's has survived a good evaluation, right? And I'd say, like, if I consider the maturation of our field now, it's really very much that we've very much better understood how to evaluate and when to evaluate. And the thing there, also the current state of thinking is evaluation shouldn't be an afterthought, but it should be really a continuous evaluation along the way, so that you could not only prove in a way that it is a usefulness, but that you understand the evaluation is an important source to learn about how to further develop your artifact, because you certainly, or your solution, your design knowledge, because you also understand it's very temporal and it's very absolutely very in flow, and so you always need to continuously evaluate and further develop. And another aspect probably, which is now getting very big in our discussions, next week we have the Design Science Research Conference in Kristiansand in Norway. There's a panel on openness in design science. So what would open formats mean there? And one aspect which is extremely important, we understand today, is the transparency, because it is a long journey. As I said, you design, you have several sources of input, and talk to people, you read stuff, you think, you evaluate. It's a very individual, long journey, and in most papers today, this is still buried somewhere, so it's not really accessible. And we get to this understanding more and more now, that this transparency about the design science process, about the making of this design knowledge, is actually really developing into a key quality criterion. And this is also why we're developing tools which would help us to keep a log book of the various design activities.
Jan, sorry if I just I'll let you finish in a second, just to make sure we're running a little bit into the Q&A time, and there are already some questions lighting.
Thank you very much.
Just to remind you that we also may want to take some of those there.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ronnie. I'm very, I was surprised myself that I haven't been stopped earlier by Christoph. No, but I'm actually really finished all right. So the idea is really to keep a logbook. We talk about journaling now, the design science research process, and there are tools available to keep such journals. And then you can structure those activities according to methods which are out there. And in the end, what you could do is you create a long URL and you can publish this whole history of making of your artifact. And that's, of course, great for a journal. You know, editors in the future should all ask for the journal to to make sure, actually, because that's the data, I'd say, we built our observations on. Brilliant. So very quick conclusion. I think it's super exciting. It's not either or, but it builds on theory and contributes to theory through design and evaluation. Very, I think, inspirational that contributes to real world problem solving. And probably another recommendation here, we, together with colleagues, actually loads of colleagues from our field, all together, we've put together this design science research cases book. So who would be interested in kind of learning more, I strongly recommend reading kind of and having a look at those cases, because it talks about the experience of very experienced scholars over the past decades, really, on long projects, and what would be their learnings. And I find it, learning by example here probably is really, really useful, in addition to going through all the conceptual papers. Thank you very much.